and welcome back. We have our second team here. This is Emmanuel from Team One, and their game is Hell Frozen Over. So, Emmanuel, if you'd like to talk to us about your game, so what it is, what genre we'll be playing, and following, and those sorts of things behind, like the key features behind your game.
So Hell Frozen Over is an asymmetrical co-op action game.
Yeah.
Where you play as a Valkyrie and a Lost Soul traveling down into hell. It's Norse mythology, so you're traveling down into hell in order to start Ragnarok, because the setting of the game is you're in like Yggdrasil, in like the northern like pantheon of gods.
Yeah.
And Odin has decided he doesn't want Ragnarok to start, and so he's locked away Skull and Hati, who are the two wolves that eat the sun and the moon and signify the start of Ragnarok. And so you, as the players, are going down there in order to start Ragnarok, because the entire world has become a frozen hellscape.
All right. So your entire game is based around this Norse mythology and the sort of historical impact of Norse mythology.
Yes.
And I'm presuming your art style is also sort of reflective of.
Yeah. So our character designs, I took a lot of inspiration because I'm the animator.
Yeah.
I'm the lead animator on the project, but I also did all of the models and character designs.
All right.
And so for the Valkyrie, I was really inspired by like Northern or Norse like Viking armor, and like how Valkyries are traditionally predicted.
Presented or
Yeah.
depicted.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah. So you've taken that historical inspiration for all of your information and design, art design behind the game.
Yes.
Who else have you got in your team then? Like, have you got a lot of animators, a lot of developers, programmers? Sort of, what does your team split look like?
Okay. So our team split is we have one animator / artist, which is me. And then we have another artist, Tristan, but he's an environmental artist. So all of like the assets that have been in the environment were created by him.
Yeah.
Then we have our designer, Oliver, and he's also done a little bit. He's done like a lot of programming.
Yeah.
We have two programmers, Aiden and Daniel. We have a writer, Finn, and then we have Flora, who's doing the music for the game.
Okay, so you have someone who's doing music for the game, and you also have a writer there. So have you got text-based dialogue in there
we
as
haven't
well?
implemented yet, but the game will be like a narrative driven, like dialogue and story for the players to go.
So you'll be bringing the like whole just narrative from Norse mythology through, and using that to drive the game as well as different in-game cues, or is it just the narrative, or
sorry, what do you mean?
so like with your game you'll be narrative driven, but will there'll be sections where there are gameplay cues as to where to go, or will it be just based off of the narrative story as to where to go?
So there will be like where the story goes is entirely driven by the narrative, but the way the game is played is that you'll be traveling through like corridors, and you'll get to like a combat room, and you will fight enemies in that room, which will then lead to another corridor. And during like walking through those corridors is when you'll have like the characters talk to each other, and you'll learn more about them. Because at the beginning of the game, who the characters are a mystery, and they will be like revealed as you like throughout the game.
As you go through the game. So you've got both combat and the narrative.
Yes.
So the narrative is your travel between combat, talking between the players' characters, and talking around the player characters' backstories, what they're doing, what their mission is, and slowly bringing the game more and more personalized as such, and bringing the personal touch to it as you play through it. And then also with the music, will you have different types of music for different areas, or?
I believe that's the plan. Yeah, so we have like just ambient tracks when the characters are walking around, and the plan is to have them like seamlessly transition into like combat music and like back and forth. So it's not as jarring as like a change when the players are playing.
Okay, so you're gonna have smooth transitions between everything.
Yeah.
And will it all be one level as well, or will there be
so we're planning on having different levels.
Yeah.
So we have one level that starts in sort of like this like ruined prison section.
Yeah.
And then another level will be like in this like frozen wasteland with it's like a giant bridge, which is found in Norse mythology. I forget the exact name of it because it's something our writer discovered, but like, I forget the exact name, but that's the set into the second level. And then the third level will be set in the House of Hell, where like the final part of the game takes place.
So you're bringing in specific locations from Norse mythology as well, and not just the story around it and the sort of, I don't really know how to put it, but like instead of just the story, you've got the story and the places linked to the story, and everything visually wise all links into those places as well, rather than sort of having your own visual style with the around Norse mythology.
Yeah,
it's all historically based.
Yeah, so mythology. Obviously we're following Norse mythology, but we're not following it 100% because obviously we're trying to create our own story.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of taking the God of War approach, where a lot of the characters and the places are based on like actual mythology, but the ways that we have them interact with each other isn't something you'd actually see in mythology.
Yeah.
Because in the actual mythology, Odin doesn't lock away Skull and Hati to stop Ragnarok. Ragnarok just happens. It's not something he can control. But in order to like craft the story we're crafting, we've had to take elements that are true and like imagine how they would interact with other elements that they hadn't interacted with before.
Yeah, twist them a little bit as well. So and we do have in the background on our TV screens here in the studio some just background footage playing from your game, and I must say the lighting looks incredible with how the lighting's sort of been implemented. Are you planning on keeping that sort of lighting throughout the entire game? Because I must say it looks great.
So something I forgot to mention is that like one of the core mechanics of our game is this idea of light and dark. So the Valkyrie has sort of like this circle of light that's around her, and the Lost Soul, he can't enter that light because like the light damages him. And so the players have to kind of like weave their way around each other, trying not to hurt one another, whilst they fight enemies that are also of different types, which is light and dark. And we chose the light and dark mechanic because it fits really well into the overall narrative of the game, where obviously the players are trying to find Skull and Hati, where Skull, I believe Skull is the wolf of the moon and Hati is the wolf of the sun. It might be the other way around, but basically you have like the light and dark, where Skull and Hati eat sun and the moon, start Ragnarok, and so the players also light and dark have to like free them.
So you've got the link there of light and dark from the mythology, and you're carrying that through in the narrative aspect of your game and within the visual aspect of your game as well. You'll have dark areas versus light areas, the dark characters and the light characters, and the sort of contrast between the two as well. So how did the concept ideation come about?
So originally when we started the project, we were just like so the way the course works is that you were given like a set of modifiers and you had to pick one. And so we just came up with a bunch of ideas to do with different modifiers. And I pitched the idea of having a game where it's like two players. One person is like a knight or something, and the other person is their shadow, and they would have to like cooperate with each other in order to like solve puzzles. Like for example, maybe the knight meets a locked gate that he can't get through. His shadow can, indeed, and so his shadow would go through to unlock the gate. That was the original idea, and then I presented that to the team. And then the writers thought like, what's like a story that we could tell with this like mechanic of light and dark, and that's where the Skull and Hati idea came from. And then from there, we just kind of started iterating the idea, and we ended up on a symmetric 3D action.
Yeah, so originally had the sort of contrast between the 2D and 3D as an idea, and then through some iteration and through the development of the story side of it, you then came up with this idea of your isometric 3D, sort of top down as such, platformer game.
But it's more just an action game.
Action game, and then sort of where did the creative design come from for the different audio and stuff that you're going to be having in the game as well?
So right now we're using like stock sound effects.
Yeah.
But our designer and our like person doing music, Flora, they're planning on like getting together and creating some sound effects for the game. So the music for the game is going to be inspired by, I believe, like Shadow of the Colossus sound music and like the Dark Crystal, like stuff like that. So you'll have that kind of music in the background.
So you're gonna sort of draw inspiration from other places that have a similar sort of storyline as such, as well as the similar vibe, and take that inspiration and make it into something your own as well for the game then.
Yeah.
But yeah, also just another question to do with animation and stuff.
Yeah.
What is your animation style going to look like? Is it going to be smooth and fluid? Are you going to have differences between the movement for the light and the dark side?
Yeah. So as it stands right now, and this is the way we're trying to keep it, is that because we're trying to make it asymmetrical, we want the players to feel different when they move around. And so as it is right now, player 1, who is the Valkyrie, they move a lot slower than player 2.
Yeah.
And when they attack, they have like a wider range of their attacks. They have a spear, but they also attack slow. At least that's the that's what we're trying to get.
Yeah.
And then player 2, they move a lot quicker than player 1, and their attacks are a lot shorter range, but they attack faster.
Yeah. So you're gonna have the contrast between the two then.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want, we have your game loaded up on there. You can show us some of the game if you want. Yeah. So if you want to hop on and we'll look at some of your game, and look at some of the different aspects that you've got in it currently.
Yeah.
If you want to put one side of the headphones on.
It is 2-player, so it is alone.
It's all right.
It should be fine.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit difficult with the setup that we've currently got.
It should be fine. So yeah, as you can see, like, so this is a light enemy, and the way the light enemy works is it charges at player 1. Oh shit! It charges at player 1 and like creates like a patch of light for player 2. Okay. And then these are the dark enemies you have implemented, and basically the dark enemies, they will try and like suck the light source out of player 1, and when they completely drain the light out of player 1 will explode into like little pieces of light that you have to collect. Oh shit! Yeah.
Yeah. And I see you've got a bit of a tethering mechanic between the two as well.
Yeah.
So is that to keep them from going too far apart, or is that?
Right now it's purely visual. Like it doesn't actually have any mechanical. It doesn't do anything mechanically, but that's something that we've been talking about, whether we wanted to have like a mechanical point. And then yeah. So that's all we have for this build, because we're just trying to get like the combat and the movement right before the animations.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's basically the game so far.
Yeah, so you've got this sort of side of it where you're going to be doing those combat zones, and then will something like that initial corridor that we saw, will that be
It'll be
narrative based zone?
Yeah.
As well, so you'll get the narrative run as you run through there, and then you'll get into the combat zone, and then from there you'll move into another narrative section.
Yeah.
I also like the sort of idea that you had where if one player dies, you can still get them back into the game, but you have to sort of go and collect these little bits.
Yeah.
I also like that you've sort of restricted the enemies that you can fight. So you've got the light enemies with light character and the dark enemies with the dark character, and they focus on the other character within the sort of the scene as such. But yeah, so are we gonna have multiple of the different enemy types
Yeah.
within light and dark, or are you gonna have, or is it gonna be the same enemy throughout?
So what we were planning is we were planning on having like 3 enemy types.
Yeah.
Dark enemies that are their main focus is to drain the light of player one in order to kill them. You have the light enemies who's trying to attack player two and kill them. And then we're gonna have like a third enemy type, which was just like a generic enemy that players could fight. Because if player one like kills all the light enemies, then they'll just have nothing to do. So we were planning on having a third enemy type in order to like increase like what players are actually doing and also to make the game hard.
Yeah.
And within like the light and dark enemy types, they're gonna be like special enemies. We were talking about maybe implementing an enemy, so like maybe like a light wizard that will put like a light barrier around shadow enemies.
Yeah.
And so if player two wants to kill the shadow enemies and to save player one's gonna have to break the light barrier because otherwise player two will die. And the same vice versa. Or well, like player two would have to break a shadow barrier around light enemies for player one to kill.
Yeah, so you're gonna have that sort of teamwork element as well then of this player is gonna have to destroy this before your other player can kill the enemy.
Yeah.
And also obviously with these getting shown off at an expo at the end of the year, how well do you think the story will be conveyed within 10 minutes versus how well you want it to be conveyed as such?
That's I don't know, that's a bad question for our writers because I'm not really like sure of the narrative side. But I do think that like from what I understand is like if you really want to experience the full narrative of this game, it will take like longer than like the 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Then that we have at Expo.
But you're gonna be able to get a good
you'll get like
a good showcase
grasp.
of the
Like,
of what the narrative is and what the are you gonna also showcase all of the different scenes that you've got?
Yeah.
So you're gonna showcase this first level that we've seen, and then the second level with the icy bridge, and then the third level with the House of Hell.
Yes.
So are you gonna sort of shorten them all, or are you gonna leave the levels at full size but take out some of the enemies?
We haven't really thought about the size of levels yet because we're still trying to get all the mechanics down. And once we've got all the mechanics down, then we'll start talking about like how big we think the level should be.
Yeah.
But we are planning on finishing the game with a boss fight if we have enough time.
Yeah.
So
you're working like all the mechanical side of it first, getting all of the mechanics sorted, and then you're going to focus on art, level design, the narrative, the actual narrative side of stuff, the audio design, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So all in terms of the mechanics, it's going to be you've got what the characters, the enemies. Anything else important?
We're also gonna have like environmental traps that we will like put around levels. So like a pit of like darkness that player one could just that player two could just travel over.
Yeah.
Because they're like made of darkness. But if player one tries to travel over, they'll fall. And then in that same vein, we'll have like shards of light like coming through the roof and like little patches on the ground that if player two steps into, they'll die, but player one is fine because they're made of light.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, just to make it so that they're not just like running around an empty room. They actually have to think about positioning someone when they're fighting enemies.
And then there's also is there going to be the ability to sort of disable these traps or change these traps so that the light character could get to the other side of the pit, or are you going to keep them?
It's not
specifically.
Yeah, it's less like barriers of entry and more just like kind of like environmental hazards.
Yeah.
Right, so like if player one's fighting like if player two's fighting a shadow enemy, they'd be able to knock a shadow enemy into like a pool of light to kill it.
Oh right.
And stuff like that.
So you'll be able to utilize them as well as the enemies would be able to utilize them against you.
Yes.
So but no, so we've covered your mechanics, your game, how your team's put together, and how is the way your team's put together affecting the way that you've approached this as well?
The way our team's put together. So because we have two programs.
Yeah.
the one doing most of the programming is our like designer.
Yeah.
And so like it's kind of slow coming up with mechanics.
Yeah.
Like with new mechanics. And so like what I've just been doing for like, the past couple of days is just like touching up like the lighting, the animations, the models, making
Yeah.
it feel as good as possible whilst we get new mechanics.
So yeah, so you're limited on the side of
Mhm.
being able to develop a game and like the actual programming of mechanics and that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
Are there any points where you're able to work a lot quicker through stuff than maybe some of the other teams?
When it comes to animations, because like I'm just using Blender and Maya, which I'm pretty familiar with, I can get animations done like very quickly.
So you were able to work through those animations quickly, work through everything quickly,
Yeah.
and get out the product for your other team members to be able to look at and go, okay, I like this idea, I don't like this idea. And how has that process gone of being able to iterate on ideas and put them out to your teammates and go, what do you think of this idea, and what have their sort of responses been? Has everybody been good with being able to give feedback on different ideas?
So we mainly do like feedback and like iterative stuff when we're together, like actually physically together, and that's when it's like really good and like really because one of us will come up with an idea and then someone else will say that's a cool idea, but what if like we change this and then we change that, and that's just how we get like different things going. And like especially with I like last week when we had like the play test where we had other teams playing our game, we had like a lot of feedback that we could build upon, and that's how we came up with ideas like having different enemies, creating barriers so that it feels more cooperative.
Yeah. So thank you very much for coming on. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks, and that has been Hell Frozen Over. Thank you very much for coming to our stream, and that's been episode 2 of our Development Diaries.